Okay, it is 4:30 and I'm calling the meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht, and a notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. I move that this is approval of meeting location. I move that pursuant to Section 15 of the District of Tofino Meeting Procedure Bylaw number 1229, 2016, as amended, the January 11, 2022 regular meeting be held electronically via Zoom and live broadcasted on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel, and that the facility provided for the public to watch and hear the meeting be located at Municipal Hall, 161 3rd Street in Tofino, BC. I'll get a seconder for that one. Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. All in favor? Thank you. And if there's no objection to adopting the agenda, January 11th, 2022, I'll go ahead and adopt that. Seeing no objection, agenda is adopted. And if there's no objection to adopting the consent agenda, I will go ahead and do that. Seeing no objection, the consent agenda is adopted. Public comment on agenda items. Ms. Best, do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Mayor Law. We don't have any members of the public present in the meeting, so I can confirm there are none.
Super. Moving on to the mayor's report. Well, here we are in 2022. Welcome back to your screens. I was so hoping that we would all get to meet, but here we are, the third year of the pandemic, and Omicron is sweeping through our communities, and as a result, of course, we're still doing Zoom, and of note, there is extra precautions being instituted in the in the District of Tofino Municipal Services Hall, etc. You know, it's interesting. Here we are in the third year of the pandemic, and the days are long. It's our second holiday Christmas season where we've had to deal with all sorts of interesting restrictions, and I know that's impacting people. And it, you know, the tendency is that we could start to get a little down and frustrated. And I just want to say I'm just so thankful that that I live here in Tofino, that we live in Canada. I'm so thankful that the vaccines are working to decrease the severity of the disease and certainly mortality. And we are exceptionally fortunate that we are here. And it's a good time to remember that there are people and places in the world that are not so fortunate. And the difference is often government, and how governments care for people, and not only their own people, but how governments can care for people outside of their communities and their countries. And so I think when I look around at everybody in the room here, I feel doubly fortunate to be part of this community, to have such excellent staff and a truly excellent council. And so I'm just thankful. Moving into 2022, I'm thankful to see your faces and know that that you have exceptional abilities and talents, and care for our community and care for the communities at large. On that note, the MRDT discussions continue, and there's been great movement on that. So I'm looking forward to the next week having a new application for the wastewater treatment plant debt servicing with the MRDT, slightly revised with great community support. Also been in the last few weeks, actually, been in discussions about a Island Health Sobering and Assessment Center, and in Tofino, and we have considerable funding for that. and are currently working very hard to find a place to house a sobering assessment center, and the government is keen to see how much support there is in the community, in the government, and in Island Health in general. So I'm looking forward to seeing some good movement on that in the next month and a half. Aside from that, again, excited to see everybody here, and hopefully soon we'll all get to meet in person. We have no delegations, I see. No correspondence. So moving right along to presentations and reports. 10.1, we have addition of signing authority. And do we have a report from financial services for this one?
Your Worship, there is not a presentation on this. This is a fairly routine matter that we're replacing. We've replaced one staff person who's on maternity leave with another, and just want to make sure that she does have signing authority as her predecessor did.
Great. I think that's actually, it's been pretty straightforward. It's straightforward in the agenda. Without further ado, unless there's any objection, would somebody like to make that motion? Go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
I'll move, that the staff that staff be authorized to add Alexandra Port, Manager Financial Services, interim, as a signing authority for the District of Tofino.
Seconded by Councillor McMaster. Any further discussions, comments? All in favor? The motion's carried. Moving on to 10.2, zoning bylaw amendment number 1287. We have shipping containers. And I believe we may have a report from Mr. Thick.
Thank you, Mayor Law. Yeah, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I just have a very brief report. I'll be sharing my screen here. All right, so hopefully we're all looking at a screen that says zoning amendment shipping containers. I just want to make one quick note regarding the actual report that was part of the council agenda package. There was an error in the recommendation. It says that this report was dated December 14th, 2021. Originally, this report was going to go on that agenda, but was pushed back as that agenda was quite full. So unfortunately, I made the error of not correcting that part of the recommendation. So it's more also for our corporate services staff. Should the recommendation be moved, there might need to be a minor date adjustment to that particular recommendation. But this presentation is related to, as I mentioned, the zoning amendment report related to shipping containers that was part of the council agenda package. Quick background, shipping containers, there's been some conversation between staff and mayor and council for likely a couple of years, but it was they were specifically noted for aesthetic and also safety concerns during the OCP update process. Council did provide some direction to staff to prepare a bylaw that would allow shipping containers for storage purposes only. That bylaw was prepared, granted first reading in June of 2020. After that, there was a public input session that was held. It was an online survey that was held and open to the community for a number of weeks. Following that, the bylaw was actually brought back to mayor and council for consideration of second reading twice, and has both times been referred to staff for further review. And so we are here a third time for potential consideration of second reading of the bylaw. Moving through some of the concerns that staff understand that council had based on the last appearance of this bylaw at a council meeting. The first one that came out was the height that was permitted by the bylaw. It was in excess of the standard height for typical sizes of containers and has since been reduced to match the sizes of containers. There was also some concern about the management of existing containers in the community. Planning staff have been working with bylaw staff, the building inspector, as well as the Tofino Volunteer Fire Department on their routine fire inspections to fairly opportunistically educate those in the community who already have shipping containers on their properties about concerns that have been brought forward about them, as well as this potential bylaw and what they might need to do to bring those containers into compliance with the bylaw. As our bylaw staff typically work on a complaints-driven basis, we have not actively enforced on any existing containers within the community. staff are currently recommending that we continue on this trajectory just due to staff capacity to actively enforce and how that may pull away from other council priorities. There was some mention of the potential use of shipping containers for short-term rentals or commercial uses. I think it's important to just take a minute to kind of note that there's a difference between shipping containers that have been modified to meet the BC Building Code and have gone through the building permit process, and the shipping containers that are considered under this bylaw. Shipping containers considered under this bylaw are basically, they are shipping containers that have just been bought by individuals and placed on their properties and not modified in any way. There are some examples of shipping containers within the communities that are actually considered buildings now. They were shipping containers at the initial parts of their life, but they've essentially been treated as building materials and have been modified to meet BC Building Code for a particular occupancy and are now considered buildings. One example would be at the western end of Campbell Street, where there's a number of commercial occupancy buildings that in another part of their life were strictly shipping containers, but have been modified and have gone through the building permit process to be considered buildings. So that those types of shipping containers are not what we're considering under this particular bylaw. It's just the shipping containers that would not otherwise meet BC Building Code requirements. There was a couple mentions from council, I believe, to ensure that there's no confusion about storage. These particular shipping containers that have not been modified to meet BC Building Code requirements are restricted to storage use only. Staff don't feel that there's a need to specifically define storage with relation to this particular bylaw amendment. It's a commonly used term and is generally inadvisable to further define within the particular zoning bylaw, as there's not really a special meaning for it within the zoning bylaw. There's some talk about specific requirements for landscape screening and or cladding. Staff have ensured that landscape screening or cladding is required for all shipping containers that are used on private property, with the exception of shipping containers found in industrial zones. Staff's understanding is that aesthetic considerations were slightly less important in those zones, and so the provision for landscape screening and or cladding is potentially not required there. And then there was a little bit of a conversation about the potential for unintended entrapment. Again, the way these shipping containers or the way that staff understand shipping containers to work is that they have two large heavy doors that naturally swing open when unlocked. And so the possibility of unintended entrapment is quite low, and would only result in the potential of a shipping container being placed at a very strange angle. That would cause the doors to fall back on themselves. One of the goals of this particular bylaw is to ensure that the building inspector does at least get eyes on all shipping containers that are brought into the community, and make sure that the appropriate modifications are made to ensure proper ventilation and ensure that they're placed on level ground. So hopefully the language and requirements of the zoning bylaw as it currently exists will render any of the potential unintended entrapment concerns fairly negligible. Staff are also recommending that the requirement for a public hearing be waived. The proposed amendment has had some previous public consultation after first reading. It's consistent with the OCP in general, and there will also be notification in two consecutive issues of the Westerly, even following the waiver. So there is still significant public information spread out, even with a public hearing waiver. The options for council to consider today would be to either grant second reading to bylaw number 1287 with the proposed amendments, grant second reading with further amendments if that's deemed necessary, deny the proposed amendment, or to again defer or otherwise deal with the amendment. Staff are recommending the first option. And if there are any questions or comments at this point, I would be happy to try and answer.
Thank you, Mr. Thick. Does council have any questions for Mr. Thick? I see none, Mr. Thick. Thank you very much. Then perhaps what I'll do right away is we'll move into, would a councillor like to make the motion? And if there's any desire to debate the motion, we'll do that within the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
Okay, I move that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1287/2020 attached as appendix 1 to the report titled zoning bylaw amendment number 1287 shipping containers dated January 11th, 2022 be amended at second reading by adding the following to part 4.1.10, 10.a.v, a shipping container shall not exceed 3 meters in height. 10.a.vi, shipping containers shall not be stacked. 10.c, shipping containers must be enclosed by landscape screening and or wood cladding except within industrial zone. 10.d, shipping containers shall include ventilation as follows. One vent with 150 millimeters off the floor of the container door. 2, one vent with 150 millimeters off the top of the container on the opposite end from the door for cross ventilation. 3, minimum size of the vent is 300 millimeters by 300 millimeters for shipping containers 6 meters or less in length. 4, minimum size of vent is 500 millimeters by 500 millimeters for shipping containers greater than 6 meters in length. And 5, top vent must include a device, a roof turbine to generate a venturi effect during low wind speeds, must not be directed towards a structure, and that the District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1287, 2020 attached as appendix 1 to the report titled zoning bylaw amendment 1287 shipping containers dated January 11, 2022 be read a second time as amended, and that staff be authorized to waive the public hearing for District of Tofino zoning amendment bylaw number 1287, 2020 and publish notices advising the public of the waiver.
Excellent. Secondary by Councillor Anderson. Any comments or debate on this from council? Councillor Thick.
Yeah, thank you. And I've spoken about this before, and I'm going to say it again. I'm not in favor of the containers being in the downtown core. I am in favor of having the containers in the zoning of Industrial Way. And the reason I say that is because I read over the OCP and I see that in the section on page 8 where it speaks about community character, it speaks very strongly about maintaining viewscapes and aesthetics. And I understand that was one of the main concerns at the outset. The second reason is that also in the OCP under policies, it says that the key objective, one of the key objectives, number 13 of Industrial Way, is to, quote, support the use of shipping containers for storage uses. So with those two things and hearing on the staff report that, quote, the staff capacity to enforce may be limited, I feel that it would be much better for our town, for our community, just to have these shipping containers in a place where they would be used exactly for what they are intended or, you know, what they could be used for. And I would support the shipping containers in the industrial zone only. So that's my sentiment on this. And I appreciate all the work that's been done about changing and amending this, but that's how I feel about shipping containers in the downtown core and the reason I support them being in Industrial Way. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thick. Any other comments from council? I see none. Okay, I do not have a comment on this. I think I see that staff have listened to council and come back with amendments according to council's wishes, at least majority of council. So with that in mind, I'm going to call a question. All in favor? And all opposed? Any opposed? One opposed. The motion is carried. Thank you. Business initiated by council members. Do you have any external appointment verbal reports from council members? Councillor Thick.
Yes, I'm just going to bring this forward in brevity at this moment in time, but I have a question from a few community members who have asked for some explanation about the lack of recreation programming during the month of January. People are feeling very much, I guess, shut in, for lack of a better word, and they're really feeling the need to use our community hall. And I feel that we don't really have some strong policies. Maybe I'm a little bit out in left field here because I don't know exactly the capacity of our staff. And I understand we are having vaccination clinics there, which I'm in very strong favor of, but it just seems that in, for example, in Ucluelet, there are many programs that are ongoing and are working, you know, in this January timeframe. So I'm bringing it forward without a letter to accompany my request, but I'm just wondering if there's anyone on council or on staff that could maybe speak to the lack of programming in January in our community, and just the the community hall, the use of the community hall that seems to be so desperately in need at this time. So I would like to
just want to clarify here for Councillor Thick. This is for you are speaking as appointment to the Recreation Commission. Is that?
Yes, that's correct. I've had people come to me because I am the council liaison for the Recreation Commission, and so I have had people from the Recreation Commission ask me these questions. So I'm bringing it forward to council.
Councillor Steer.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thick. I don't know, maybe this suggestion here, I know that part of this business initiated by council members, and this is a fairly, you know, it's a very specific question around programming around the January time, but I think there might be a broader question that you might be thinking about in terms of the access and availability of the community hall for recreational purposes. And maybe a more appropriate venue where we can have a more fulsome discussion around this might be at a committee of the whole, where I think we'd have more latitude to discuss it in a lot more detail and give opportunity for staff to be able to have a little bit of background to be able to bring forward some of those issues that you brought forward. That would be my suggestion at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. I see Ms. Best. And just noting that we don't have our, you know, our manager responsible for recreation here. So,
thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to provide council and the general public an update. 2 hours ago, we actually just put a notice on our social media saying the winter and spring recreation guide is coming out on January 14th. And the notice that was placed in the public says it's almost time to jump for joy. The 2022 winter spring recreation guide will be published this Friday, January 14th at 4 p.m. Thank you for being patient while our recreation team has worked hard to ensure programming can continue with the current public health orders and guidance. Registration will be open on Monday, January 17th, 2022.
Thank you, Ms. Best. Councillor Thick, noting that this is sort of a question for a manager who isn't here, and maybe a broader question, as Councillor Steer is pointing out, perhaps we can move a discussion to the appropriate time in a committee of the whole. I think that would that suffice for you?
Yes, I would like that. I'd like to talk about the longer term use of our one and only facility that we have for indoor recreation at this time. I mean, we do have some opportunity in the evening for adults, but I'm mostly concerned about children and just, you know, how we are providing for them. And I just, I really feel for these young parents. And I think, you know, we can have these conversations and that is good, but I'm also concerned. I just wanted to bring it forward that, you know, there's an immediate need here as well. So yes, I'm interested in the conversation about the philosophical viewpoints and how we can accommodate that, but I'm just bringing it forward that there seems to be a very immediate cry for some more programming. So thank you for listening to me, and thank you, Ms. Best, for just pointing out what is happening in the next week. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other comments for Ms. Thick, Councillor Thick, sorry. Any unfinished business? None. Question period. Ms. Best, do we have any anything for the question period?
Thank you, Mayor Law. We have 2 members of the public present, so I will call for the first time if either of them would like to ask a question. And they have up to 2 minutes to speak, and I don't see them submitting anything, so I will call a second time. And just for good measure, a third time. Okay, seeing no questions, we can move on. Thank you.
Okay, well, in that case, we're moving into closed session. So I recommend that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91 of the community charter to discuss matters related to A, personal information about an individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent, and C, employee relations. Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. All in favor? Okay, we are going to move into closed session.
Thank you, Mayor Law. I'm just going to close the meeting